Hey everyone, welcome to the show. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about hand injection molds and how they operate. Over the last few months, I've had a lot of questions about problems and all this sort of thing. So I figured we would tackle the subject today, and I would show you how your injection mold is made and how it's laid out and why some work well and why some don't. So let's get right into it. I will bring you down on here to the table where we have a few different molds laid out, and I will explain them to you. All right, so here we are. We've got a few molds laid out here. We've got our really super expensive pointing device. We always have a coffee with Bailey's close by. And let's get started. So we've got a couple of molds here. This here, they're all injection style molds. This here is a Do It Midwest Finesse mold. This here is a custom stick bait mold I had done. And so is this. So I'm going to show you kind of some of the issues. Now, some of the things that we're going to talk about are more complex on more complex molds. But these are pretty straightforward, and I wanted to keep it pretty straightforward for this particular video. So here you have a small stick bait style mold. It's set up, this is a hinge here, so this mold folds over, and like that. This here has alignment pins. That's how this line molds up, how this mold lines up, and this one is the same, it has alignment pins. So let's start with the very basics of terminology for these molds. So you'll hear sprue, the word sprue. When they say sprue, they're referring to this section here to here, this little section here. Very commonly in the hand injection market, that's a 5/8 inch port right here. And you can see we got them here, 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 and on this one it's the same. So that's your sprue. Your runner is the channel that runs down here. In this case, it's down here. This one has a chamber where the plastic sits, which is not the best design, but this is how it was made when I got it. And there is no runner. It feeds directly into the bait. So the next, and probably one of the most problematic features in molds that you can buy, is called the gate. The gate is the entry from the runner to your bait. So this little section right here. Now I know you probably can't see that terribly well, so I'm going to try and get a little closer. So the gate is this section here that leads into the bait. Okay, and I'm going to explain a little bit why that's the most problematic part in most molds. So there you have it. So that's the basic terminology for the molds. Now you have what's known as air channels or release channels, or you could call them all different kinds of things, but essentially the goal is to get the air out of the mold. Now you can see on the Midwest Finesse, they only have a couple. They're right here, and I know that's going to be really difficult to see because they made them very small, but essentially there's a little tiny line that comes up into this channel, and when you inject your plastic, it feeds through and the air pushes out these channels. Now, when you're injecting, the reason they have these, and I'm going to show them to you on this mold, the reason they have these is so that air can escape as the plastic's being pushed in. That air has to get out, otherwise you're not going to be able to fill your mold. On this one, you can see we have all kinds of vertical channels that come up along the bait, and then we have evacuation lines that run out of the mold, and those is what takes the air that comes out of these and runs it out of the mold. So if you don't have good porting, and I'm going to show you an example of that, that's why I have this mold here. I didn't have enough, this is a big volume of air to get out. And what was happening is, when I would shoot it, I would have air from this bait, after this bait was already shot, coming across. So I had to mill, and I did this with a Dremel tool. I had to put an additional air evacuation route in there to get that air out. Now that's not the best way to go about doing it, but it worked for the time being until I get a couple other molds done up with better air channels. So that's the basics right there. That's pretty straightforward stuff. Now let's get into a little bit about why these are so important. So when you compress your plastic in and the air is in these cavities, it has to get out, like I said a minute ago. If not, that plastic has to travel. So if you got air in this, say you got air in this cavity and it's not able to get out, the plastic has to travel around it, so it can cause all sorts of issues with your mold, with your bait in the end. One of the biggest problems that we find, and I say we as a general statement, is that the gate on most molds, or not, I shouldn't say most, I should say the gate on a lot of molds has a problem where when you shoot your mold, plastic, when it's hot, as it cools, it contracts, it pulls in. So what happens is, as I shoot this, and let's say this cavity's full, as those baits cool, it sucks plastic in from this runner. So as you'll see, when you shoot, that plastic will start sucking down. So what happens is, if you don't top this off, what you'll run into is air pockets that get sucked into those first couple baits. What also will happen is the gate, if the gate cools down before the bait cools down, it won't be able to suck plastic in from this runner, so it will cause dents in your bait. Now, a lot of guys just take a round file and touch that up real quick like that, and they'll open that gate up to allow that plastic to be able to get into the bait. So that's pretty straightforward. It's a pretty easy fix if you find that you're getting a lot of dents. There's a lot of mold companies out there, a lot of good mold companies out there that understand these concepts. There's Leonard Smith at Bait Junkies. There's Josh Clark at Angling AI. There's a ton of really good people out there that understand these concepts. Bass Tackle, just really good molds. But some of them will have problems, so you'll have to be watching out for that. So, the other thing you can get is what's called a Sprue Extender. You can make them out of copper. You can get them, you have to get them custom made if you want a nice one made. But you can make them out of copper. I don't know if there's a video out there on how to do that, but it's copper tubing that extends up above your thing to hold extra plastic. So that's kind of the gist of the mold. It's pretty straightforward. It's not too difficult, but when you're new, a lot of these problems keep coming up and we see the questions a lot. So that's why we're making this video. As far as quality of the molds, aluminum CNC molds are always a better option than sand cast or plastic or stone or whatever material someone's making. The aluminum CNC molds are really the way to go for quality. That would be my recommendation if you're going to spend the time and money to buy a mold, that you get a good quality mold. I think you'll be happier in the end. There's also, from what I'm hearing, I've never used them, but a lot of those less expensive eBay style molds are coming with issues. The porting's not correct. There's lots of bubbles in them. So it's just best to go ahead and invest in a decent quality mold. These halves will go together. And then you'll shoot your plastic right straight into that. Some molds will come with screws to clamp them together. This one I use DeWalt clamps, these here, and you just clamp it right together, just like that. And you put one on each side, and that'll hold the mold together while you shoot it, and then unclamp it to take it apart. So that was pretty much it on mold mechanics. It's a pretty straightforward video. We'd love to hear your questions, comments. Drop them down in the box. Subscribe, like the channel. suggest some videos for further education and learning. Our fishing season is just about done here, so we won't be doing too much more of that. So that was pretty much it, guys. The molds are pretty straightforward to understand. They get more complex with every little detail of the bait. So as you get baits that have more and more detail, they get more and more complex with porting and air and all that sort of stuff. So, but that's the basics. That's how they work. One of the biggest things to remember is that when plastic cools, it condenses, it shrinks. So you need to make sure that you have enough plastic in your runner and in your sprue to accommodate for that. If not, you'll have to top your sprue off as that plastic sinks down in. So just be watching for that. So if your first couple of baits have little air pockets in them, that's what's probably causing that. If you find that you're having trouble, you may have to shoot your mold a little slower, a little faster. Try different things to fix that, and then remember what you did. One of the biggest things that we see a lot is people will shoot the mold and they'll have a problem and they say, well, my mold's messed up. Well, you got to remember that these molds are designed a certain way to be shot, a certain way. So if you're shooting too fast, your mold could very well not take the plastic and evacuate the air fast enough. So that's one of the things that you got to be watching out for. So take your time, shoot your molds, enjoy this hobby. Like I said, if you have questions, comments, drop them down in the box. We do our best to respond to all of them. So that's pretty much it. So you guys have a great day. Hopefully you've liked and subscribed to the channel. Once we get to 100 subscribers, and every 100 thereafter, we'll do some kind of giveaway. So hopefully we will see you back for another video. Hey everyone, welcome to today's show. On today's episode of Kenco Fishing, we're going to be talking about hand-poured... No, we're definitely not fucking talking about that.